Welcome to the Connected Campus podcast, where we explore the ways that diverse professionals are working every day to optimize their efforts to recruit, retain, and graduate their students.
We are here today with another one of our continuing episodes in our series of just talking with CIOs about their backgrounds, their stories, their perspectives on just kind of the moment we are in for higher education and how institutions are kind of confronting their digital infrastructure and sort of how they're pulling everything together to create really connected campuses and great student experiences and all that good stuff. So we have a longtime friend of Pathify on for the show today. So I'll let you introduce yourself briefly, and then we'll get to our the rest of our conversation.
Yeah, thank you, Dustin. I'm excited to be here with you today and to dive into a discussion on the Connected Campus. I'm Rene Eborn, and I'm the Deputy of Digital Transformation and Associate Vice President for Strategic Initiatives here at Utah State University. And I'm excited to talk to you about how our campus went from trains to planes to typewriters to tweets to chalkboards to chatbots. We have a lot to discuss.
Yeah, and I know for your background too, like you have many different and interesting perspectives just on like working in and with higher ed, and I mean, like you went to USU as a student, so like you kind of even have that kind of longitudinal point of view of like, you know, even just that heart and core of like what was my experience like, and sort of what you want to sort of honor from that and everything. So I think we'll start there though, of like, you know, you went to USU, you worked at USU. Uh, Early in your career, and now you're back and everything. So like this just being, you know, two higher ed people talking, obviously like it's a place I'm sure is very special in your heart and everything, but like what makes it like a really special place to you? Like is there things that you feel like are kind of unique about the culture or the campus, like, you know, all the above?
Yeah, yes, thank you for asking that. So, yes, I did actually complete my bachelor's degree here at Utah State while I was working full time, and I was a young, a young student, a young mom, and I think the reason that Utah State is a special place for me is because it's where I've grown up. It's where I grew up. It's where I started my educational journey. It's where I got started, and then as it's been a safe place to grow and to develop and to continue to learn and to now teach and help others. And so part of that is just that I've had that long experience with them. And additionally, I think that Utah State, when we recruit students and when we talk to our students, we always talk about them to join our Aggie family. And truly, it really is. We kind of have this kind of we're, the land grant school of the state. We focused early on, our mission was on rural education. And so I think that that's because I'm from the country, and that I think that I do have a very special spot in my heart for it. And coming back now after being gone for 15 to 20 years, coming back, it's interesting to see the differences in some of the things that have held true, and so that's been very nice as well.
Yeah, because obviously like, you know, a lot of what we'll talk about today is, you know, digital schools, online learning, like all these different facets and aspects of what higher education looks like today. But like that emotional core is obviously always going to be that through line of whether it does happen on campus or off, or, you know, in a digital space or any of those sort of things. So it is like, you know, recognizing that, and every faculty and staff member and peer, whomever, like is going to, you know, want to try to nurture that and sort of sustain it and all those sort of things. So I think it's a great place to kind of start and sort of ground the conversation, because I think you know, when we were sort of prepping for this and I was looking at your background, there's a lot of different things that I wanted to hone in on. One of them being sort of your origin story being at USU and coming back, but then also that you've worked in and around e-learning, online learning, digital education, whatever you want to kind of call it, you know, since those kind of early days. And what was that like? 'Cause I think, you know, like I came in professionally when it sort of was having one of its many sort of rising waves and everything, but like any advice from that longer term perspective, because that was just one of those things that was such a big kind of disruptive force to kind of the paradigms of higher education as we sort of traditionally thought of it. So like, you know, you're I'm sure just sort of like working in and around that space now, but you were there sort of more towards the earlier days. So just any sort of reflections on that and maybe what it gives you now.
Yeah. So what it was like in the early days, that's a great question. It makes me feel old. But when I had finished my bachelor's degree and I was here working at Utah State back in the it was kind of like the 1990s. It was kind of like when things started happening. Utah State and institutions nationwide were very focused on providing education, to rural areas and also, to their area, their local areas, their regions, right? That was a big focus. And because Utah, we are the land grant school, and we were we had a rural focus on the state during that time. Education technology was very important. EdTech was important. Even back then, we just used different technology mediums at the time. We just had to use what was available. For example, we were working early on with in the 1990s with the nation, and they had funded some AG satellite telecommunication satellites. And so we would provide full motion visual broadcasts across the state. And so students would come to like these locations to their local schools or whatever, and we could broadcast education. And they referred to this, as distance education, like that was kind of how we did it. Utah State here, we actually even took it a little bit farther. And because we wanted to keep that connected campus feeling and keep that feeling of our Aggie family, we actually trained professors to be what we refer to as traveling professors. And we would literally like fly them to these locations early on. And so we just worked with the technology and the infrastructure we had at the time. And it was fun. It was fun. It was exciting. Did lots of great things. From a long-term perspective, I guess that I think about is that technology is ever changing. We have lots of new things, and a lot of things change it's like I kind of refer to it as a pendulum. It goes back and forth. Like I feel like I've watched it go back and forth, that some things are important and then they move and then it comes back. And I think just keeping the balance, keeping it there in the middle is really good. But from a long-term perspective, I think that the outcomes for higher education and the goals haven't necessarily changed. Our goals are still to connect and educate and develop educated citizens that can live their best lives, right? We're still just trying to make people's lives better. How we do it's changed a little bit, and the tools and the technology we use, our processes we use and our tech stacks may change. But one thing that's stayed consistent from my perspective is kind of our outcome and our goals and the people, right? It's still about people. It's still about us human beings trying to be the best we can. It's about relationships and staying connected and effectively communicating with people so we can all grow together and be our best selves. And so I think from a long-term perspective, I haven't seen that changed. Back when I used to be a project manager back in those days, I had different tools, I had different tech, I was doing different things. But at the end of the day, it was trying to provide education, trying to get people to have the right skills, helping them be better in their lives and working with people to do that. So from that perspective, I think that stayed the same. And that's kind of a good thing, I think.
Hmm. Well, yeah, and I mean, I think through these conversations that I've been having with folks like yourself across the country, or like those are things that are sort of ringing true that have just been like really refreshing, and I'm trying to kind of internalize is like that. Obviously, yeah, like it's still human centered, not getting too distracted by sort of the bright and shinies and all that, and it being kind of like mission driven, like you said. It's like we were using what we had at the time to still sort of honor, improving
Yeah.
people's lives and reaching them wherever they are, and not letting uh just the happenstance of where you're physically located be like, well, I guess I can't pursue the education that I want, like
Yeah.
the particular class or the program or whatever else. And whether that is like, I even remember like just one random class I took was that sort of like distance education model, where it was like one of the other locations a teacher was teaching at, you went to the
Mhm.
classroom that no faculty member was in, and you were just watching them like broadcast, that sort of
Yeah.
idea. And it's like, yeah, like we've had these sort of waves where the quality has improved. So it's like, oh, it's a better camera, and you can
Mhm.
hear it better, or this or that, or actually like capturing the recordings and posting them somewhere, and you can watch them on demand. But those early days where that was such a like big leap, and that uh you know, being in a place with a culture that could sort of connect those dots of like, well, it's still just people teaching people, and like
Mhm.
it honors what we want to accomplish and our goals and everything. And, we'll do the best we can with what we have at our disposal, and not even like getting too caught up in where like, oh, it's not perfect, so it's not even
Yeah.
worth doing or something. It's like, so yeah, definitely a lot of interesting things there, I guess, from that sort of longer
Yeah.
perspective of how this
I
change has
think
happened.
I think another perspective that I think about and that I'm experiencing now is that back then, even like just 10 years ago, um, we would change, but the change wasn't as quick, right? We weren't as agile because we would implement technology stacks, and sometimes we'd keep them, especially in the higher education vertical, we'd keep them for a long time because we don't have a lot of money. So we would keep them a long time and make them work for us. And I think now I get really excited now. I feel like right now is the most exciting time in my career because technology is on such a fast trajectory right now. And there's so many things that are coming available that like on a weekly basis we can have changes to our systems and that promote better learning and promote better technology and infrastructure so that we can do these things. And so I think from that perspective there's a lot of change and a lot of scrambling and figuring out how to do it the best way, because a great example is this is our student information systems. A lot of there's a lot of us in higher ed, we haven't changed our systems in like 10 to 15 years. And if you even talk about it, people don't want to. Like it was so painful back then to do it. Now they don't even think about it. But realistically, there are like technology has advanced so much, the trajectory that, you know, soon we might be able to do that and do it very painless, like have these weekly and nightly updates. Whereas before we used to wait for like quarterly updates and then, change the whole system at once. And it was a big deal and it was painful. It's changed and it's not quite as painful. So I'm excited about that because I think we can see some really great things happen when that really matches up with the outcomes and the mission of the institution and the line.
Hmm. Yeah, definitely. That is like maybe sort of a quiet thing where like there is like a huge impact, and even just like on that emotional level of like, oh, it was so painful and like it took all this
Hmm.
like whatever, like, but it's sort of this quiet thing where uh with a lot of this stuff it's like you only notice when it kind of like is very tough or
Yeah,
awkward or whatever, so it's going to become where it's just like, oh, it's kind of a we'll do it
yeah,
when we're ready and we've got the resources and do all the planning or
yeah,
whatever else. And because yeah, I mean, it's the idea of like uh certain things that are sort of like sitting with me is like, we were able to do it before when it was hard. Like, so we kind of have that capability or maybe
yeah,
that sort of fortitude. And now that it's even easier, maybe we can just like do it even better or something. There's just a lot of sort of
yeah,
the like change management stuff. I think has also been coming up a lot
yeah,
in the conversations. But um, and I think in terms of navigating those things, I'll sort of try to kind of dance through and segue to my next question, because I
mhm,
think like there's obviously so many players sort of in the mix, and certainly nowadays a lot of various external vendors or other folks who are collaborating and coming in. And I think you know, if people go and look at your LinkedIn, like you have a very broad assortment of logos and things and like organizations that you've worked at are really awesome, because I think like you have that unique perspective of sort of knowing where everybody's coming from or sort of how the different cultures work. And it could be like, well, they actually did it this way and that was really cool, whether it is another higher institution or somewhere that's, a company that works in the space or something. So, uh, part of it is I think like the different roles themselves, but then also the organizations that you've worked in, like where you're at now. What do you feel like each of those unique roles and perspectives and things like? What do they give you currently?
yeah. I was thinking about my many logos because I have worked at a lot. I've worked at Western Governors in the early years. I worked at Southern New Hampshire. I worked, from some universities that have grown very rapidly and done some exciting things. And I always, I always get told by my current boss that I'm always like 6 months ahead. Like I'm always too far ahead. They're always like, slow down, Rainier. You're like, so I've learned to navigate in that space, but it's actually good because I think what unique these unique roles I've had has like really helped me be successful in helping with big large technology initiatives or change management initiatives, because it has provided me with a really broad and diverse set of tools in my toolbox basically to help me build the relationships with the people. And if you build those relationships with the people that you're working with and that you're trying to serve and trying to provide services for, then you can build the technology and the solutions to map to that. And so I think that because I've had all of these different varied roles, that it's helped me be able to come back and say, this worked well with this type of learner or this type of learner or this type of person. And so that it's helped me be able to be a little bit more um, strategic about the way I approach things. Some things that I work here, I know aren't going to work at this place because of this certain thing. And so I think that's been being able to jump from industry back and forth from industry into higher ed. It's given me that diverse set of experiences and tools to help me be more successful in navigating in my current role. And then as I help others and mentor others in this area as well.
Yeah, and I imagine too. I mean, this is just maybe just a brief sort of follow up. Is like, you know, even just I'm sure over the span of time of like the way that an institution works with like in a tech company or something else of like really trying to create like a partnership, and like you've literally been on both sides of that sort of
Yeah.
conversation. So I think like, are there any sort of reflections on that of sort of, do you feel like maybe the dynamics have changed, or like it depends on, any other kind of factors of just like how sort of the deeper sort of partnerships sort of evolve or sort of manifest between like an institution and a company they work with?
Yeah. I think that, higher education, the vertical of higher education, they, they've been kind of a little bit slow to like, adopt some of these, new practices and new way of doing things. But I think in the last few years, there's been the pendulum shifting a little bit, and they're realizing higher ed, we're realizing that um, we need to partner with different industry partners as well as different vendors to help us get the things done that we need to do to educate our citizens, right? And to do the thing to meet our mission and our outcomes. And so I think that we refer to it as, in higher ed, we refer to it as vendor management, right? Like working with vendors and doing things. And I think that being able to have been in the industry side and understand how the vendors work, like you said, that has helped me. So as I've come over to higher ed and I start figuring out, okay, we need to solve this problem and we need these kind of tools or solutions in that, then we can go out and we can find the right partner and the right vendor to help us do that. And I've been able to, because I've grown up in higher ed, I can help negotiate those conversations and make that be a painless, kind of a less painless way of doing things. Higher ed has always been a little bit they're always a little bit worried because they take their brand very seriously, right? Like that's their intellectual property, that's the quality of their education, that's their service. And so we have to be very careful who we partner with so that we don't ever, diminish that, right? And so making sure that you select partners that will help enhance your brand, not diminish it, is really an important factor to higher ed professionals like myself. And so I think that has been good for me to be able to be on both sides so that I can help have those conversations, because sometimes what industry speaks isn't what higher education speaks. We have a different language. And that's why I think that when I was saying earlier that I think one of the most important things within that whole like making things special is being able to communicate with people and help each other and understand different ways we do things. And then that's with anything, right? In anything in life. And so I think it's similar here, but I do think that that's really important. And I've been able, because of my different unique roles, I've been able to do that a little bit more successfully here at Utah State in that regard.
Yeah, and I think it's like a weird thing where like you want to honor the things about higher ed that make it unique, but also have enough self awareness to realize where it is still just like it's like everything else or
Yeah,
whatever. Like try to you know
yeah,
uh, jump around those different kind of mindsets, whatever. But and I guess it's something too where like at and this might be just sort of the like recency bias, or I don't have anything to compare it to, but just
mhm,
like the shift of more people who came up through traditional higher ed getting into ed tech roles and different things. So it's like they can at least start to like speak the same language a little bit more versus it
mhm,
being like, companies who were just sort of like, I don't know, we could sell to colleges, right? And they're just,
yeah,
it's like, and
exactly.
yes, they do, and they have, and they will, and whatever. But uh, yeah, so just even that sort of change where it's like
Mhm,
there's starting to be a little bit of that blurring of like
mhm,
the two sides. But
yeah.
um,
One thing I like to do is when I go, I sometimes I go present at like conferences or things like that. And not at a recent conference a year ago in Florida, I did one on business practices that work in higher ed, and it was just like completely successful. Like I got people reaching out to me afterwards and that. And because there are a lot of business practices that higher ed could really like use and adopt, that work well in higher education. And so I think be having vendors and like that partnership, go back and forth, you can find those, like I said, those tools or those little like nuggets, and those can be really beneficial and really add value and success for institutions that are like launching new technology or doing something new and different and want to make a change. So
Hmm.
yeah.
Yeah, just the
There's a lot we
humility
can
and
learn. It's like life. There's a lot we can learn from everyone, right? And from each other.
yeah, and
And
just
just
yeah,
have,
like the humility to be sort of open to suggestions in that
yeah,
way or whatever. Yeah.
yeah.
And I think the last sort of thing that's kind of unique for your background too that we had kind of explored when we were preparing is that like you don't have a formal IT background. Like you didn't, study computer science and were like a coder and, doing all this stuff, but
Mhm.
like you're so immersed in that world and work with those people and are, uh, I guess what I sort of gathered and what we kind of talked about, I think more so doing like project management kind of stuff, maybe being more of the like
Mhm.
organizing force for everything. So like how has that kind of played out of like not having that formal IT background through all the different things that you've done?
So I actually think that it's been a key to my success. Is that I started off with my education. I actually got my bachelor's degree here at Utah State, as I said, in liberal arts and social sciences, and so I didn't have a lot of any technical like training or background. I did get my master's degree in education technology, so I did eventually do some of that, but you're right. I didn't have like formal coding, or I didn't come up through the computer science program. And I think that the reason it's been successful for me is most of the change management now requires new process, new technology. It's often, you're working with new people. And sometimes you're not working with new people. Sometimes you're working with the same people, right? And so by having the opportunity to work within higher education, I've been able to have the functional business side of the business and what it needs to be successful. But then taking that opportunity and enhancing my personal educational portfolio with like leadership certifications and technology certifications, they've added to my leadership competencies. And I think that's actually the reason I've been able to be successful and have successful initiatives under kind of my areas, because I I had both sides. I can talk both sides of the fence. Like I can talk on the functional business side, and then I can also go on, climb over the fence and talk to the technical side of to those people that do the coding and do that, and make that transition very effectively. And so I think I actually when people come to me for advice, I always encourage them to get diverse like training and leadership in different areas, even if it's not your favorite thing, because I think it makes you a well-rounded person. And I also think that I always call myself a cheerleader. I think that the reason we get things done are because of people, and we should cheer people on. And so there's a lot of people that don't have tech background, and there's a lot of people that have tech background, and we all have to work together. So I think it's important to do both.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, that's like the X factor of it is I think it again a very like even just the language you use of sort of like the functional business and the like functional technical and like the
Mhm.
language and just the people and just sort of like bridging that gap, but then it's sort of like the overarching where it's like the leadership stuff because it's like you gotta like throw a little like dash of that spice in there every once in a while to like
Yes.
inspire, to motivate, to celebrate, and all those sort of things. And
Hmm.
it's like you said, where it could be like, well, I got my bachelor's in computer science, but maybe I do get my MBA, and then part of that is like one of my electives
Yeah.
is like leadership course or something, like
Yeah.
it's
Exactly.
like you kind of try to like have all this sort of like muscle memory for like
Yeah.
whatever situations come your way, and that being like within just like the world of higher ed, like a very refreshing take of like all of those sort of disciplines or sort of experiences and skill sets and everything. It's like we need people who can bring all of those worlds together to sort of leverage the potential um, of all the folks that are working together for that mission of empowering the students that you're serving. So uh, we will wrap up though, because I feel like we're very well positioned here for a beautiful landing of our final question that we ask everybody. So curious how you'll take this. What does a connected campus look and or feel like to you?
That's a great question. I believe that a connected campus to me has to be a combination of your physical space and integrated digital platforms focused on people, like exactly I've been talking about. I think that your space that you work in, and then all of your digital platforms, they all need to be focused on people, being able to deliver accessible, safe, and reliable learning experiences, and delivering relevant working credentials to people that will improve their lives. That's to me what is kind of a connected campus. It's like bringing it together. So whether you are a student that wants to come on campus and do it in person, or whether you want to be an adult student and come at night, or whether you don't want to come at campus at all, but you still want to do it and you want to do it online, you still want to be connected and feel like that. So I feel like that a connected campus is a combination of both of those things, and it's very important to do it well so that you can focus on the people.
Hmm. Yeah, yeah, just a beautiful harmony of the physical and digital, and
Yeah,
then like a
yeah.
keyword that I like that kind of just like stuck out to me is like reliable. Like that's a good little sort of like flavor in there
Hmm.
because it's like, yeah, it's really annoying when things don't work the way that you think they should
Exactly.
or supposed to or whatever.
Yeah.
So that's a good one for
Yeah.
folks to.
I think that there's a few things that you need in order to have that combination of the physical and the integrated digital workspaces. You need to have a robust infrastructure. I mean, you've got to be able to, whether that's in person, like your parking, or as well as your technology infrastructure, you've got to have accessible and modern platform tools. You've got to have you got to integrate your digital and in your engaging communication on both sides, and you got to be able to offer modern LMS kind of learning tools as well as improving your digital communication tools. Like, it's all got to come together in kind of a little package so that it is connected and it does work, and that it's not and that it meets the modern day user, right? It needs to be modern. We have to modernize.
Hmm. Yeah, I mean, just a good like user experience and design, and then like something that I thought of as like a small but sort of a very clear example of like the physical and the digital coming together, and all of that is like like you said, like parking, where it's like if you could have a way, like how like if you're in like a parking garage and it's like, yeah, there's this many spots available. It's like that's like a beautiful, just simple thing where it's like, okay, cool, I'll go up the
Wouldn't
next
that be
level,
great?
and
Yeah.
then it's like anything like that of like how you're saying where it's like if you're bringing it together it's like well how are we delivering that so that hopefully somebody could like pull up their phone and know the parking situation before they even leave kind of
Exactly.
thing. So it's like so you don't want to like segment where it's like well we have it there at the parking lot, if you're
Right,
there
no,
you
it
know
needs
what's
to
going
be,
on.
yeah, it's gotta be both. It's a great example is the
Yeah.
parking,
um
or like we have, this is silly, but we have, like the laundry, like our on-resident users that share laundry facilities, like they get their laundry done and then the washer sends them and notice your load's done, things like that, like, things like that. But you're right, like for the digital part of it, for the parking is, you know, saying, oh, you know what, parking's gonna be bad today. I'm gonna ride the bus, right? Just being able to make that decision before you even get here, that's connected. That's like knowing, and that requires having. It takes a lot of work, and it does require a lot of technology to support that.
mhm. Yeah.
So
Um, so yeah, a lot of great advice and just reflections and experience and things that you're sharing. So I appreciate you taking the time out of your day to share it all and to get folks inspired and give them some ideas of things to do to create a connected campus wherever they are. So we'll have ways to connect with you as well. But yeah, just thanks again for taking the time.
yeah, thank you. It was great to visit with you. Have a great day.
Thanks for listening to the Connected Campus. Please leave a 5-star review for the show and share it so others can discover us. Make sure to also subscribe so you never miss an episode. Thanks again for joining us, and we'll see you in the next episode of the Connected Campus.